Ballot item number 64, Order M120, second reading of Bill 120, an act to amend the Estate Administration Tax Act, 1998. Mr. McNaughton.
Member for Lambton-Kent-Middlesex.
Mr. Speaker, I move second reading of Bill 120, an act to amend the Estate Administration Act 1998.
Mr. McNaughton has moved second reading of Bill 120, an act to amend the Estate Administration Tax Act 1998. Pursuant to Standing Order 98, the member has 12 minutes for his presentation. The member for Lambton-Kent-Middlesex.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker. I've introduced this bill, Bill 120, the Estate Administration Tax Fairness Act, because I believe we need to overhaul the estate administration tax in Ontario. I looked at the changes that the government brought into force in January, on January the 1st, listened to the dissatisfaction of stakeholders, the anger of constituents, and it became clear that this tax is taking us in the wrong direction. We continue to complicate our tax system, making it more difficult to navigate for families and small businesses that don't have the benefit of expensive legal counsel. It's not fair and it's not right. This is a tax on assets that the government has already collected a lifetime of taxes on. Grieving families trying to settle the affairs of their loved ones have new, harsh deadlines and penalties hanging over their heads. When this tax was reviewed and modified by the government, it's clear that compassion and sensitivity were not top of mind. Instead, they doubled down on the death tax and made changes to prioritize the bottom line in getting their cut of the estate as quickly as possible. I think we need to take a long, hard look at this tax in particular and try to bring some compassion and common sense to it so we can give some relief to Ontario families. The first thing my bill does, it proposes to cap the estate administration tax. Ontario wins the silver medal for the highest death tax in Canada, and I don't think that's a distinction that we want. In Alberta, the cap is $400. In Quebec, you won't pay much more than $100. So a $3,250 cap is certainly not out of line. We talk a lot in this House about supporting Ontario's small businesses and farmers. We appreciate the contributions they make to our economy, and no one here ever hesitates to applaud them. But how about actually doing something to support them? This tax is extremely punishing for family farms and family-owned businesses. When you have spent a lifetime incrementally building a business, acquiring assets that allow you to grow and hire more people, you accumulate the vehicles, buildings, and other property that the government will be taxing when you die. And these illiquid assets can give rise to a death tax amounting to many tens of thousands of dollars. So who usually suffers most from this tax? Families whose assets are tied up in the buildings and machinery that provide their livelihood. Farmers may have equipment and property worth millions, but they can still be cash poor. So when the finance minister comes looking to collect tens of thousands of dollars worth of tax after the head of the family passes away, there is no available cash. And I'm not saying it's the death tax alone that causes this, but it aggravates the situation because that family is going to be simultaneously dealing with capital gains tax and income tax. Spouses and children are often left to sell the family business to cover these tax bills. I think we should be ashamed as legislators in Ontario that this sort of situation is not uncommon and that we contribute to it. Families that are job creators that have worked hard and contributed to Ontario's economy, built lives around the farm or the family business, have to face losing a loved one and then deal with losing their livelihood. Let's not forget that this is a tax on property for which the deceased has already paid taxes. I believe a cap of $3,250 is very reasonable and would go a long way to limiting the harm of this tax. It's also important to note that this tax is levied on total estate value. This total does not account for the debts of the deceased. So again, I hope this government realizes an estate can have assets but still be cash poor. This bill would ensure the amount of tax payable would be based on the net value of the estate and take into account encumbrances, the debts and liens, that are associated with one's estate. I think exempting estates valued at under $50,000 from paying this tax is another much-needed change we can make to show compassion and offer some relief. This government wants to pretend that this is about a tax cut for the rich, but the fact of the matter is that this tax currently can be levied on anyone who has property worth over $1,000. If all you have to your name is a beat-up 1997 Honda Civic, the government could still go after your estate to get its cut. So for the government to claim this is about a tax cut for the rich is absolutely ridiculous. They should be embarrassed by how out of touch they are with their own policies and how they affect the people of Ontario. I'd also like to point out that this bill would exempt charitable donations from the death tax. If someone wants to leave all or a portion of their estate to a local charity, I think it's ludicrous for a government to be collecting tax from that. The charitable bequests of the dead are just not the place to go looking for quick cash. I think we should show some respect and encourage people to put money back into their local economies and give to worthy causes. The bottom line here is it's a bad tax at a bad time for families. Someone has passed away after a lifetime of paying taxes, and this government takes that as another opportunity to collect taxes. And the grieving family that's left have to deal with it, Mr. Speaker. I think we can all agree in this House that this is a vulgar, heartless tax. It's really quite tragic that the government has dug the province into the sort of financial hole that drives them to not only continue to collect over $143 million annually from grieving families, but to implement measures to crack down on estate trustees who don't get information to the ministry quickly enough or who make a mistake in their filing. Who would take the job of being a estate trustee with the threat of thousands of dollars in fines or even jail time hanging over their heads? Instead of spending responsibly or not wasting money like we've seen this government do with gas plants, Mars, Pan Am bonuses, the government always comes back to wringing every cent possible out of Ontario taxpayers. Now there are perfectly legitimate means of avoiding this tax. Strategies such as naming of beneficiaries, joint tenancy with right of survivorship, use of multiple wills, alter ego trusts, and the use of living trusts. These strategies are all legal, but they open up vulnerable people up to a lot of risk. A person of modest means who can't afford good legal advice may create some serious legal problems for themselves and loved ones. And these financial maneuvers can leave our senior citizens vulnerable to exploitation. So as I said before, this is a tax that punishes the people who can't afford good legal counsel. It punishes the people who don't go looking for loopholes, and it punishes the grieving families who quite often only learn there's such a thing as the estate administration tax in the days after losing a loved one. So this tax actually falls inordinately on the shoulders of the middle and lower income classes. The people of this province already pay taxes their entire lives. We pay taxes on all of our hard work, on all of our savings, our income and investments. We also pay taxes on the things we buy and cherish, whether it's the car in the garage, Mr. Speaker, or the painting on the wall. The people of Ontario recognize the importance of paying taxes to pay for the services we all value and to support our most vulnerable. But this morbid tax means we are being taxed to death, at death, and after death. The death tax amounts to a tax on a lifetime of hard work and sacrifices. It punishes people who have worked hard their entire lives to build something from the ground up, whether it's a home, a small business, or the family farm. A person's assets should be kept in the family for their children, spouses, or for charitable causes that they hold dear. They should not be taxed and then retaxed by a government that, quite frankly, squanders its revenues. Ultimately, this is a tax that I think we should be doing away with altogether. But I recognize the realities of working in a majority government. I hope that the measures I've proposed here will be thoughtfully considered by all parties so we can work together to give Ontario families some relief from the financial and emotional burden that this tax is imposing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.